So, you want to learn jazz? Let me tell you how I started and how I came to it, what didn't and what did work. So, I came to jazz probably in my late 20s. I already played classical piano quite well. I had a classical music background, played a lot of Chopin, Liszt, Beethoven, that kind of stuff. Anyway, I wanted to get into jazz, and so I bought a book and another book, and I have a whole bookshelf back there full of books. And that didn't work so well. It's just like so much information to take in. I even went to my local university and took some lessons from several different professors. And again, so overwhelmed, getting bits and pieces and not really have a good clear plan of how to proceed. So my advice is to learn the blues. That's kind of the basics. And it can be as complex or as simple as you want to make it. So wherever you're at, I think everybody has something to gain by studying the blues, especially with jazz piano, because everything you learn there, it's going to apply to whether you want to play jazz standards or upbeat tunes or slow tunes, slow ballads. You'll be able to apply it to everything else you learn. So I have a kind of a curriculum here. I'm going to take you through step by step, and I kind of assume some baseline. You're fairly familiar with the keyboard. You know maybe some chords, like what a C major chord and F major chord is. But beyond that, you could really be pretty basic in your understanding. So we're going to go through the form of the piece, and we're going to play it in several different ways. So we're going to go through the blues form, playing bass line and a shell. So just the bass note and a shell. And then the next step is we're going to dive into a little more of how to construct bass lines. So maybe what a bass player, an upright bass player would be doing. But it's kind of fun to do it on the piano too. If you don't have a bass player around, you can play it on the piano. Okay, and after that, then we want to work on playing just the shell in the left hand. So we did the shell in the right hand and the bass line. You're going to just do what you were doing in the right hand in the left hand. Okay, so what that allows us to do is to free up the right hand now to play bluesy stuff, to either play a solo or the tune or whatever. Okay, so once you can play just the shell in the left hand, then we're going to work on how to play blues licks and riffs, that kind of stuff. So, and I have if you can stick to this pattern of the blues scale, and there's two different kinds, it's a way to think about it that there are really no wrong notes. Okay, no matter what chord you're on, if you play these collection of notes, you're going to sound good. So, I'll go into that, how to build a solo, how to play blues licks and riffs. And then I'm going to go into playing like a Red Garland, Oscar Peterson block chord style. So, if you can play the shell on the left hand and the right hand, you can play blues scale, you can get away with this sound. And it sounds really hip, but it's not as hard as you think. And lastly, I'm going to cover bebop lines. So you'll hear Oscar Peterson go in and out of kind of playing bluesy stuff and to more outlining the chords with more of a bebop style. So Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Parker kind of stuff. So that's kind of our plan going forward, and let's dive into it. Okay, let's start with bass line and shell. So we're going to go through the form of the tune, and it's just important just to go through it, really get this ingrained, but we're going to play the root of the chord. So if it says a C chord, play a C in the bottom. If it says an F chord, play an F on the bottom. Okay, what you're going to do in the right hand is you're going to play the shell. So the shell is the third and seventh of the chord. So what I mean by that is if you spell a dominant chord, so this is C dominant, you're going to take the third and the seventh. And just play that. That's the shell. Those are the most important parts of the chord that make it sound like the chord. So, there would be C, and then you're going to need to do the same thing for an F chord. Okay? There's the third and seventh. So, the trick here is, you don't want to skip around. You want to be as smooth as possible. So, if we're here, E and B flat, it's going to go to A and E flat. But if you notice, you could get there from there. Or you could flip it around and get there from there. Okay? So you're going to go through the whole tune that way, the third and the seventh. And I'll play it for you, or you could play it with me. Let's turn on the metronome. Here we go. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. 1, 2, 3, 4. and then you repeat. So, some things to think about there is that you want to be as economical as possible, okay? That's fine, C to F. It gets a little trickier when we go to the 6th chord. So, 3rd and 7th, 3rd, 7th, you can go here or there. So, or, and then it's just circle of fifths from here. So I have a ton of exercises on circle of fifths things and other videos, and you know, some PDFs if you want to download that. I'll put some in the links below. So, okay, and then the turnaround is the same thing you just played, just faster, twice as fast, right? So you got the, this is measure 5, 6, 7. And then we're gonna go to A7, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. And then the turnaround is just that, but every 2 beats per chord. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then it starts over, okay? So a turnaround is it's just a piece of a chunk of the music that kind of signifies, hey, we're going back to the beginning of the piece. And usually the drummer will kind of do some kind of thing too. He'll do some kind of fill or something. Then it signals to the group, hey, we're going back to the tune again. So that's all a turnaround means. Okay, so you just played bass line and shell. So what you'll want to practice is actually that inversion. So can you do the same thing, but with the shell flipped around? So let's do the same thing and go through the tune that way. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, down to F. Turn around. Okay, so that's step 1, just be able to go through the whole tune. So if you're finding this useful, you might also like the PDF and backing tracks that I've also prepared to go along with this material. So the PDF I've prepared has the form in it, has some example solos, has the scales that I've talked about, also some example bass lines and voicings to use. So everything I've covered here. I also have backing tracks prepared. So it's just me playing along. You can play along with me in the keys of C, F, B flat, and also G. So it's really useful to be able to play these in different keys as well, because you're not always going to be playing C jam blues. Anyway, hope you find that to be useful. All right, so once you can do bass note and shell, let's expand on that to construct bass lines. So what an upright bass player might play, but it's fun to do on the piano too. So a real easy way to do that, well, you already did one way, is just whole notes, just the root of the chord. So if it says C7, you just play C. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you have some choices. What if you want to do that in half notes? You can approach from below by a half step or above by a half step. Okay? So and then the other trick I'm going to add is you can just play the 5th of the chord. 1, 2, 3, a 5th away, so C to G. So sometimes you might need to just fill in space. So you can just go 1 to 5. Okay, so that's all I was doing there, just the 5th or the root of the chord. So, and you can combine those. So, let me show you. Let's go through the tune. It gets a little tricky with A, right? When you get to those chords, because the chords are moving faster, there's more chords than just C or F. So you're gonna have to figure out how to navigate those. But again, if you think of A, what's a half step above that? And then what's your next chord? D. Well, what's a half step? Maybe approached it from below. Okay, and then you could go, you're going to G here, you could approach that from above. Or you could approach it from below too. And then same thing on C. Or, okay, either one works. So that sounds a little strong, but it works. And you hear bass players do it all the time. So I'm going to go through the tune, and I'm going to just do half notes. So I already did whole notes. That was the first step, which is root and shell. Now we're going to do a bass line in half notes. Okay, and turn on the metronome at 120 to the quarter note. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. So that's one way of doing it, and there's multiple, right? You'll notice the turnaround at the end. The chords were already moving by, per every 2 count, so in half notes. So I didn't have to do anything different. Okay? So that's one way of doing it. So that's like level 2. Level 3 of doing this, do it in quarter notes. That becomes a little harder because you have more notes you got to fill in. So between C and F, you have to fill in 4 notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. So the goal is to land on whatever the chord is. So a C7 or an F7 or an A7. You're landing on C or F or A on the downbeat. That's one way of doing it. There's other ways of doing it, but this, for my brain, is kind of the best place to start. So let's, that was one way I showed you. Just step up, and you might need to add some half steps to make it work, right? So between C and F, I can't just walk up. I get to F too early, so I need to put a half step in there. And the E flat sounds pretty good because it's kind of a bluesy note, but the D flat maybe works too. Also works, right? Okay, what if I start by going down? So I have the same problem, just in reverse, right? Here's okay. I get to F on the downbeat, but I can't just walk down to C because I get there too early. So you need a half step in there somewhere. Or kind of works. I like that better. Maybe because it matches. The E flat matches the F chord. But anyway, so I'm going to go through, and it gets a little tricky, but you can do the same technique when you get to these chords that move a little faster. A. See, now they were half notes and you were doing half notes, but now that you're doing quarter notes, you can put 2 per chord now. So you can either do half step below or half step above. Or from below. Either one works. Or in closure, you hear some this sometimes, but this is, again, beyond quarter notes. That's above and below the half step. Anyway, so let's play through it. I'm going to go a little slower. I'm going to go about 100 beats per minute because it's a lot to think through. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. C. Need another C. Now F. F. C. A. D. G. C. And so forth. Okay? So, a little tricky. So, practice that. If you can only handle whole notes or only handle half notes, slow it down. You could work something out or write it out. That's one way to do it. So, there we've covered bass lines in some depth. Once you can do that, now let's go to thinking, let's just do the shell in the left hand. So the shell we were doing here in the right hand, let's just do it now in the left hand. No right hand for now, because it's a little tricky thinking, what chord am I on when I'm not actually playing the note of that chord, right? Just playing the shell, I'm not playing a C. So you want to go through the whole tune and just play this shell. And you could add a note if you want. Add a third above. Sounds good. So that's a C chord. And then F chord. Okay, so I'm going to add another note on top, but you could just watch these two notes here and get away with it. So let's just go through the whole tune, just left hand, because what you're going to do next, you gotta be comfortable doing that in the left hand. So let's go back to 120 on our metronome. C. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. 2, 3, 4, 2, 3, 4. You could add the extra note. Going to F for 2 measures. Back to C. Now A, D, G, C. Turn around. You can just repeat what you did. Okay, and then back again to the top. Okay, so one thing you want to practice is let's flip it up here. This also sounds good. So anything in this range is going to sound good. Between this C here and this C here, it's going to sound good with these voicings. If you get down here, it gets a little too mucky. So you want to be here or here. Maybe that's a little too high. It sounds pretty good here too. So let's do this. You could add there, but that's not as hip, I think, as that. So there's some voicings for you to practice. So anyway, this is C, flip the shell around, and then you can add a note on top. Okay, let's try that, and I'll play it for you. Or you can play along. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. C, F, C for 2, F. Back to C. Now the A. Good. So you'll notice I just flipped back to what we did before here, just because this is a nice space on the keyboard to do it. You could do it there. It starts getting a little high, though. I could have done that, too. And again, if you want to get more comfortable with these voicings, I have a whole ton of videos and a whole a PDF and a set of shorts. I did a Circle of Fifths challenge every day of January 2024 that goes through things just like this, because this is just part of the Circle of Fifths, right? A, D, G, C are all fifth relationships. So getting those under your fingers, this kind of stuff, going around the circle of fifths, super useful to practice, and you can just drop it right in to the blues. Okay, once you can play these rootless voicings with the left hand, you're ready to add now right hand stuff. So this is like piano trio kind of style. The bass player's covering bass line. You're covering this middle stuff, and then you want to cover right hand stuff. So I'm going to give you some kind of fail-proof ways of sounding good at an early stage using the blues scale. So there's 2 forms of blues scale. The easier one that's always going to sound good, there's really no wrong notes, is the minor blues scale. So let's go through that. So C, it's those notes, which is your minor pentatonic scale. So pentatonic is a 5-note scale. And it comes from, because it's from the minor scale. Anyway, 1, 3, 4, 5, and 7. Now to get the blues scale, it's just a modified pentatonic scale. And that's what you'd see on Wikipedia or whatever, your textbook, is that's like the blues scale, right? But it's really just a modified pentatonic scale. So, using those notes, get those under your fingers. There are no wrong notes. If you play this C chord at the beginning, there are no wrong notes. And then if we go to the F chord, you use the same notes. The C blues scale over the F. So that's what makes it sound so crunchy and so good. All right? Okay, C and F works. What about A? Ah, pretty spicy. D. So it works through all of them. It works good. So the reason why I wanted you to get comfortable playing left-hand shells, because that's all you're going to play. You can either play your 2-note shells or your 3-note shells. And then just play simple stuff. So you could either just play pentatonic, okay, so that's one way of doing it, right? And again, I didn't turn the metronome on, but you could turn the metronome on. You could go along, just noodle around. So things that make blues sound good, you don't just need to be playing all the time. All right, it just doesn't sound very coherent. So think about how language works. There's pauses, there's stops. You repeat something, and then you repeat it again, and then you repeat it again, and then maybe you repeat it, but in a different way, right? All right, so come up with something. It can be simple. It could just be quarter, quarter, half note. Quarter, 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 half note. I'm not even moving my hand position, right? And you can get something that sounds pretty good. So I think the thing, especially if you're new to improvising, is you just want to fill every space. Like you don't ever want to take a break. And it's kind of exhausting to listen to. And it's hard on your brain to think about, right? So find ways to break up the space. Tell the story, right? Maybe you have an interval of a third you're playing with. All right, played with this third here in the scale, or you could play with these whole steps. I just played 3 notes, right? And some of the best solos I have heard start out really simple, just a little short statements, then they build on those and they develop their ideas. Okay? Just like a good movie or a good story leads you in, has pacing, has moments of more intensity, more stuff, and then it backs off and lets you breathe and think about it. Okay, so shell, noodle around in this minor blues scale. So I promise there's a second blues scale, and that's the major form. So it's a little different. There it is, okay? So it comes from the major scale. 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. So essentially what we're doing is we're removing all half steps, right? These are half steps on the keyboard. We're removing all half steps from the scale. Gives it this folksy kind of sound, right? So if you look at the C major scale, the half steps are here and here. So we're going to remove the notes that make half steps, the F and the B. Okay, and you could get away with just doing that, but you kind of need an extra note to make it sound bluesy, and that's the E flat, that flatted third. Okay, and this mostly has no wrong notes, and you'll see. So for C chord, sounds good, okay? Even the E flat sounds good, kind of crunchy. When we go to the F, E flat works, E not so much, because we get a clash there. Okay? So you might need to adjust a little bit. So you'll often hear that play between the major and the minor third. It's a very characteristic blues thing. Okay? So C. Okay, I'm just playing around with that. Just be careful. E flat, depending on the chord you're on. Okay, so go through the tune that way. You just play shells. I was playing shell plus the bass note in the left hand. That's another way of doing it. It gets a little tricky. If you can reach the 10th, if not, just do that or that. Okay, so you got the minor blues scale. And you have the major blues scale. Okay? And what you'll hear sometimes is people mix the two. So go listen to that. When you feel comfortable, you can flip them back and forth and interchange between the two scales. All right, once you're comfortable doing shell in the left hand and blues scale or scales in the right hand, let's do another way. It's essentially the same thing, but we're going to kind of voice it differently and do it more a block chord style. So what you'll do this voicing in the left hand, and then you're gonna play in octaves, just the blues scale. So I'll show you how. So I got this voicing here. So you'll add an extra note in the middle, and you can even slide that middle note. Yeah, pretty crunchy, right? And it's a lot simpler than it sounds. It's blues scale up here with an added fifth here. And it can be, it could be this or this, right? Some fifth or fourth in there. And you can grace that middle note. Okay, so I'm going to go through the whole tune this way. Let's do 120. I'm going to play with the chart this time. We're going to go through just that way. So 3-note voicings in the left hand, blues scale with an added fifth in the middle, okay? A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. 2, 3, 4. Going to F. 2 for F. To C. A. And that's the whole thing. Let me show you a little on the turnaround. You can do this. Just go down chromatically. Pretty spicy. Okay, so that's a fun way to play. It gets a nice beefy sound with not that much effort. Okay, so the last step I want to show you, and it's kind of a leap up, is Bebop Lines. So what I mean is the style developed by Charlie Parker, Dizzy Gillespie, that kind of sound. So what we want to do is think about each chord now kind of individually. So instead of blanket, just say I'm going to play blues scale through everything, now I'm going to think about what chord am I on, and I'm going to target certain notes of that chord. So we're just going to target the third just to begin with, because I think that's the easiest and what sounds best. So what do I mean by the third of the chord? Right here, this E. Okay, and we can approach by half steps. So just like we built bass lines, very similar to what we just did with bass lines. And close the third is a very common technique. And then F. What's the third of the F? So you could just go through the whole blues form just in closing the third. And then the next step is see can we connect with scales or other notes to get to that. So what I mean by that is that kind of thing. Now I've landed on this A to get there. But let's not do that because it's a lot to think about right at the beginning. So let's just enclose the third. Okay, so let's go through the whole tune. Let's go a little slower. We'll go at metronome 100. A 1, a 2, a 1, 2, ready, go. Two, three, F twice. And then close the 2, 3. Close the third. And close the third. Let's not do those. 2, 3. And you could just keep going. So it sounds kind of simple. Sounds kind of dumb maybe. But it'll get you somewhere. It'll get you thinking that way. More in line with, or closer to maybe what Charlie Parker or Dizzy Gillespie or even Oscar Peterson does. Because he throws a lot of that stuff, Red Garland. They will throw little bebop things in. They'll play a bunch of bluesy stuff and then maybe come to the turnaround, or they'll throw in a little thing to make it a little more interesting. They'll throw in this bebop kind of stuff. So, let's see how I did that there? That's a way of connecting it. And you might have to work it out. Go slowly. That kind of thing. You'll get comfortable how to navigate through these lines. So what I did there, and close the third, I'm going to go up the chord now. Oh, and I already know how to get to the third of the F chord from here. Okay, and then I've got to figure out how to get back to the C. That kind of thing. Okay, so we've done the C to the F. You could get to the A that way. We're trying to land on the downbeat or somewhere close to it on the third of the chord. Yeah, sorry. I just did it as an example. You could just go down the scale instead of enclosing, but that's the beginnings of thinking about how to do bebop. And the blues is a good way to do it because by now, if you've gone through all this, you know the chords pretty well. So it's a good way to think about what are some maybe harder concepts to think about navigating through these chords. So, the A. Oh, you'll notice I didn't enclose that. I kind of cheated. I didn't do the dominant. I did the D minor, and so sometimes you'll see that. I think intuitively I just did it. Because sometimes you'll see that. So go into the A, go to D minor instead of D dominant. Okay, so that's what I was playing there. So kind of a 2-5-1, which is a very jazzy kind of chord progression. Anyway, I digress. There's lots of different ways to do this, but that's a good way to practice bebop stuff. So practice going through your chords that way. Another way to do it is just run the arpeggio. Right? So I'm going 3, 5, 7, 9 on every chord. Okay? So you might want a downward thing that would also work for that. So that would work. It's that, just inverted. Ah, you go up higher. So instead of going there, upper extensions. Ah, that worked. Something like that. You could do. I was trying to keep it simple. something like that. So go slow. If you have to kind of start and stop, that's what I've found, is to get this, go slow, try to work it out, and then go for fluency. Come up with something simple. If you need to, write out a simple kind of solo and then put it with the metronome, then get it really rhythmic after that. But there's a lot to kind of digest when you're doing that kind of stuff. You're thinking about note choices. You're thinking about, well, how do I get to this chord on this beat? Anyway, so there's kind of the crash course into constructing bebop lines over the blues. That turned out to be a monster lesson, so I covered a ton of material. If you liked what you saw, I have a ton more resources over on my website at FrazierPianoStudio.com. You can subscribe and you can download lots of PDFs, lots of material like this. I have challenges occasionally, lots of resources over there. So if you liked this, please check it out. Have fun practicing.